and the counter is within the function. Okay, so this line's the same. This stuff is the same. So before we had size of, we don't have size of. We have size var. So when we use this, we're actually going to pass the size of our array to this. Okay. This is all the same. This is the same. This is the same. This is the same. Okay. So the difference is here, if we've had the carriage return, at the very end, after we've printed out what came in, we return a 1. And the 1 is just a flag that lets us know, hey, we found something. If we didn't find anything, we return 0. And if there's no characters in the buffer, we return 0. So this function does exactly the same thing, except for when you call it, it will return a value. So the value is the US8, and it returns either 1 or 0. It returns 1 if it found something, and 0 if it didn't find anything. What this allows us to do, so up here, and this is a trend, right? When you're writing code, is I call it kind of information hiding, right? Or you're taking a bunch of complex ideas and distilling it down to an interface that is, what do I need to interface to this complicated code? So in our loop before, we had this complicated code, and now we've stuck it into a function, and it's the same code, but we have an interface that we pass it a pointer to our buffer, which we haven't talked about pointers yet, and we pass it the size of our buffer, and that function will return, I found something or I didn't. Now, our loop becomes a lot simpler. So our loop, instead of having all that complicated code in it, now has one function called receive function, and we pass to it our buffer, and we pass to it the size of our buffer. So and our buffer is up here as command. Okay, and this program does exactly the same thing as the last program, except our loop now only has one line of code in it. So we've hidden a bunch of information, and there's a reason why we hide that information. One is we don't want to look at it every time, especially if we know if it works. And the other reason is it allows us to reuse a piece of code that we know works. So now that once we put it in a function, we can reuse that code over and over again in lots of different programs. And instead of having to write and debug that code every time, we just call this function.